We're joined now by Thomas Duffy, the newly elected National President of Macra. Thomas, thanks very much for coming into us straight from the count. Thomas, can you just tell us a little bit about your own background, your involvement in Macra and what it means to you now to hold this position?
Thanks very much, Claire. I'm incredibly proud and delighted to be the next president of Macra. I'll be taking office from May in 2019 to 2021, succeeding James Healy, who's done an absolutely excellent job as president. My background, I'm from a 95 dairy cow unit that I farm in partnership with my father, Ned, and my mother, Kathleen. We farm quite close to the Meath-Cavan border, near enough Virginia and County Cavan, for people might recognise that. I suppose in Macra, for the last 10 years, it's been an incredibly huge part of my life. I've held roles at club and county levels as the Young Farmers Chairman. At national level, I was elected as National Council Rep for Cavan. I served as the Vice Chair of the Ag Affairs Committee for 2 years. I've been a member of the Board of Directors for the past 2 years, and I've actually been the Chairman of the Board for the past year before the election today. I suppose now for the next 2 years, Macra is going to be my full-time commitment and working for the benefit of young farmers and rural youth as a whole.
So you're steeped in the organisation, Thomas. Thomas, what was unusual, I suppose, about the election campaign for yourself was that you ran unopposed, and not since 2007 with Catherine Buckley, the first female president of Macra, have we been in that situation. What does that say to you about the organisation? Were you surprised that you were the only one running for it?
I suppose I wasn't overly surprised. There was a couple of factors that kind of influenced it. I suppose the first thing that people have asked me, what does it mean for the leadership of the organisation? And when we look at the VP's races, every single one of those were contested in the 3 regions, in Munster, Leinster and the Northwest. We have an incredibly intense competition in Munster between 3 candidates, 4 candidates in Leinster, which shows the level of potential leadership there is, and 2 in the Northwest, two very strong candidates there as well. So I suppose the question about the future leadership of the organisation, it's pretty clear that we are still doing a job of developing our leaders and developing good people to lead the organisation. I suppose it was just happenstance the way that it happened. I think maybe some of the people who were potential for leadership for whatever personal reasons maybe were not able to run. As I say, it's not completely unheard of. Catherine was elected Catherine Buckley was elected unopposed as well. I suppose going forward, I would suspect that we will not see an uncontested race again for quite some time, because there is the quality of candidates coming forward there.
And Thomas, we'll just get on to your priorities that you're going to be focusing on in a second, but there was a little bit of confusion as well earlier about a vote that whether it was eligible or ineligible. And you just wanted to clarify something there?
Yeah, so there was a small clerical error which added to a little bit of confusion, but in actual fact that ballot was completely valid. The club was completely registered, so there actually was no issue, but there was a little bit of confusion about that. It was just to do with an update on a database system. But in actual fact, everything was in accordance with our rules and the ballots were completely valid.
So Thomas, look, you're coming in, you're taking the mantle over from James Healy this May. You're coming in to agriculture to represent young farmers at a really, really challenging, turbulent time. You've got Brexit, you've got the Common Agricultural Reform. What are the key priorities and the key issues that you're going to campaign on behalf of young farmers?
So I suppose when I'm asked this question, I normally like to break it down into 2 separate. There's the immediate issues that we're going to have to address very, very quickly, and then there's sometimes longer term ones that can often be overlooked. But as a young farmers organisation and as a rural youth organisation, we fill both those roles. We have to take the longer term view as well, because many of our members are going to be farming for the next 30 to 50 years. I suppose on that, the most immediate issue is probably Brexit. Ultimately, the UK will do whatever it is that they feel best for their country. What we need to ensure is that the proper supports are put into place to counteract any issues with the trade between ourselves and the UK and any loss of sales. And on that, Macra is going to be, as part of CEJA in the European in Brussels, we are going to be fighting very, very hard to ensure that all the proper supports are put in place so that farmers are not made to suffer for what is a political change. And also to give us time to, I suppose, find new markets and to overcome any impact. Personally, I don't want to see a no-deal Brexit, but ultimately that's beyond the control of a young farmers' organisation to decide.
And I know, Thomas, you'll have to get into all those briefs yet. So also, Thomas, like you're from a dairy background, as you mentioned, in Macra there's a lot of part-time young farmers in beef and in suckler as well. What are you going to do to kind of meet the ambitions for the young farmers in all those different sectors on the dairy side and on the dry stock side?
I suppose the one thing I would say is what concerns me a lot in the narrative lately has been an attempt to divide beef and dairy farmers and to turn them on each other. And in reality, that doesn't benefit either sector. Neither of these sectors can survive without each other. They're completely co-independent. And I can understand because a lot of beef farmers feel that they're being dismissed or undermined or seen as irrelevant by some of the comments, very uneducated comments about, from some of the dairy representatives and from some of the voices in the dairy sector. At the same time, we see what's happening with, say, the likes of calf exports at the moment. That's a very vulnerable trade, and it is something that we need a proper developed move towards a more sustainable dairy beef sector. In terms of our suckler sectors, which are quite vulnerable, particularly as a result of Brexit, but also we can't see them being made as a scapegoat for issues such as climate change. We need to have a proper adult conversation. The suckler sector produces the best quality, the highest grades of beef, and they need to be properly rewarded for that work. But there's an artificial divide coming, I think, between calf rearers and suckler farmers. In reality, many of the really good young beef farmers I know don't see any divide. They're working on both sides of that. Some of them will have suckler cows and will also rear calves, out of season. They're building up to ensure that they have the maximum profitability for their farm.
Thomas, look, we're almost out of time, and I know we'll definitely have you back in again over your tenure at Macra. But just finally, look, at 75 years that Macra is celebrating this year. How relevant is the organisation today compared to 75 years ago, from a young farmer and from a rural social fabric point of view?
I think it's disturbing to me in some ways that many of the challenges that was faced 75 years ago by young farmers are still the key challenges that are faced by young farmers today. I mean, we look at 75 years ago, there was issues of processing, there was issues of education. Those are issues that Macra has fought very, very hard to try and progress, and we have. But obviously the requirements are moving forward the entire time. Young farmers need to be better educated than ever. They are using new technologies. They're advancing at a pace that Macra has actually, through its SkillsNet programme, been continuing to do that. Competition for land is still one of the key issues with Macra's Land Mobility Service, which was developed a few years ago. That's been an incredible success in moving that forward. But also in terms of our trade with the UK, 75 years ago, that was a key thing, and now we're still talking about it now. But there are new challenges too that Macra is going to move up to the plate. So we need to be a proper voice on rural youth as well as young farmers. For our young farmers' point of view, issues like climate change weren't talked about 75 years ago, but Macra wants to be the voice on that, and in terms of improving the conversation between farmers to ensure that farmers are both given a just transition, but also that that our sector isn't unfairly labelled, and that the supports are put into place in order to allow us to make those changes.
Thomas, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, and congratulations again on the new role.